Thank you and welcome to everyone to this meeting of the Grants Subcommittee, Place-Based Community Grants. We are going to start with an opening and I'm going to invite Councillor Fiso to begin the meeting with the karakia timataka.
Tūtaua mai ruka, tūtaua mai raro, tūtaua mai roto, tūtaua mai waho. Kei te mauri tū, te mauri ora ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e.
Thank you, Councillor. And before we begin this morning, I want to acknowledge, given this is the Place-Based Grants Fund, I want to acknowledge the passing of two significant people in one of the community areas. I want to acknowledge Mania's passing and Reverend Robert Pomari, stalwarts of the Brockville community. And I know, Councillor Fiso, you and members of your community feel that loss very keenly, and we want to acknowledge that because it's the members of the community like those two folk who make a difference in terms of these place-based organisations. So our condolences to you and to the Brockville community. Turning our attention then to apologies. We've received apologies from Councillor Steve Walker, Adam King, Sarah Davy-Nitis, and could I have a mover, please? Sorry, a seconder. I'll move it if somebody else seconds it. Thank you, Councillor Fiso. So we accept apologies of those three. All those in favour, just raise your hand. Those against, that's carried. Confirmation of the agenda. I'm going to move that the subcommittee confirms the agenda without addition or alteration. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Barker. All those in favour, raise your hand. Those against, that is carried. Declarations of interest, and members are reminded of the need to stand aside from decision making when a conflict arises between their role as an elected representative or committee member and any private or other external interests they might have. This is the general register of interests. Does anyone have any amendments to make to that register? No? Well, in that case, I'll move that we note the register and we confirm the proposed management plan for elected or independent members' interests. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Oh, do I have a second? I beg your pardon. Second, please. Thank you, Councillor Fiso. So raise your hands if you are saying aye. Aye. That is carried. Confirmation of the minutes. I want to move that subcommittee confirms the minutes of the Grants Subcommittee meeting held on 28th of June 2021 as a correct record. Do I have a second? Thank you, Councillor Elder. All those in favour, raise your hand. Councillor Elder, are you voting to move that? Thank you. Anyone against? That is carried. Thank you, Ms. Lanini. We're going to move on now to Part A reports, the place-based grants, community grants for 2021-22. And before we begin, I want to acknowledge the staff in their extraordinary efforts to work with community groups, both in this sector and others, following the recent lockdown and the work that you do to assist our community to get through and to work out how they interact with us over grants. So if I can hand over to Ms. Lanini to make any comments and then we'll carry on from there. Any introductory remarks?
Tēnā koutou katoa to the subcommittee members. You have a report in front of you that just outlines the grant applications today. I have nothing further to add except to acknowledge the work of place-based communities across the city through really difficult times over the past year, as our chair has. Happy for you to take this report as read, and also all of the assessments that the staff have provided to you, and they will answer any questions around specific applications. So Mr. Coffey, Ms. Harrison and Dr. Tamimi will answer to the specific grant applications that they have assessed. Nothing further.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lanini. So my plan is to go through each of the applicants in turn as they are noted on the spreadsheet, and we'll ask any questions at that time and raise any matters. And before we do that, we'll check on conflicts, of course, and then we'll come back to the recommendations of noting the report and any decisions that we make at the very end. So can I just check in with you around any conflicts? So just go through them, and if you could raise your hand if you do have a conflict. So Brockville, Councillor Lefiso, Caversham, oh sorry, Anna for Brockville. Yes, so now we're on to Caversham. Anna and Marie. Corstorphine. Conflicts. Greater Tyree Community Network. Progress of Waikaiti area. South Dunedin Community Network. Was that just Anna? South Dunedin Community Network, thank you, Anna. Greater Green Island Community Network. North East Valley Community Development Project. So let me just check, Anna, with you. The only ones that you were able to participate in are 3, 5, and then 1 of the multi-year. Is that correct? Okay, all right, thank you. And we note that Hannah is no longer got a conflict with the North East Valley project. Is that correct, Hannah? So is there, did I capture everything? Councillor Elder.
Hi, I just have a question. I mean, I have probably catch up with Eleanor every 6 or so weeks in South Dunedin, but I'm not on anything of theirs. So is that a conflict of interest? I'm just wanting to clarify. I have no definite role in there. I just support them. So I don't know how to consider that a conflict. I haven't even been catching up every 6 weeks, so.
But let's ask the governance support officer for some
advice. I'm not on any role, not
okay,
any special role.
We'll just let her answer.
There's no financial.
No.
Nothing like that. You're not.
No.
Okay. No, there's no conflict.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, it's just clarifying because it's
thank you.
tricky.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on then to the spreadsheet, and we're going to start with the Brockville Improvement and Amenities Society, and I note that Councillor Fiso and Anna Parker are stepping back from that. Right, questions for staff? I'm taking as many.
Should we have moved into non-public?
No, this has been live streamed. This is in public. This one.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Councillor Lefiso. Councillor Lefiso.
Yes, just trying to.
Sorry, I was on mute. Do we get moved? Do those of us with conflicts of interest get moved into the waiting room or something, or do we go away, or?
Looking to governance support officer for advice.
No, if you just stay on mute and not vote, if we lose more than one member, we lose our quorum.
Would it be helpful to switch the video off?
You can switch your video off, but yeah, you cannot leave the meeting.
So, because we've got a quorum issue then, Rebecca said. So if you have a conflict, if you could just turn off your video, and that will be the demonstration that you are stepping back. Okay, lovely, thank you very much. Okay, open it up to questions of staff. Any questions of staff regarding the Brockville group? Yes, Hannah.
I just noted in the report that there was a reference to Matawai Consulting having done a lot of work with this group and pro bono, and the comment was something like this is the level of support that can be expected. And I just wanted to clarify, is there an expectation, or is there a sort of an underlying expectation that organisations will continue to do work pro bono to support these community groups?
Through the chair, that may have been poorly written. The emphasis there was this shouldn't be continuing, that they actually did have funds they could have paid for this, and it was very generous of Matawai to do that work pro bono, but I wouldn't be expecting that to be continuing on.
Sure, thank
if
you.
we fund them, yes.
And I'd like to acknowledge the huge sort of upheaval for this group, and one of their key members being unwell for a long period and then passing away. It's been very difficult, and I want to thank staff for working with the group to get to where we are now. Any comments from staff around this particular application? Paul, did you have anything to add? No. So we have a question from a further question then, Hannah.
I just wanted to check a little thing in the budget. So including the rollover funding, that's included in the income already. And it just, the way my maths brain works, which isn't, perfect, it looked like it would leave a shortfall in the budget. Is that, does that make sense?
Yes, it does. But with that rollover funding, they will get significant funding from us when you combine the two, coming to over $70,000. So it won't. We can never fund enough, unfortunately, but it should be adequate for them to employ someone and get a whole lot of stuff actually happening that may not. They were talking about trying to find some premises, which will be difficult in that area because there's very few opportunities there for commercial premises. But that may not be able to happen in the first year.
Sure, thank you.
I just want to ask a question about the support they received in this past year around the issues related to health and wellbeing of the members, and just how we can support going forward and progress the work they're doing in Brockville.
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah.
Okay. I think in terms of how we supported the program this year, it was primarily by not adding pressure to them to deliver something back when the committee, which is quite small, was clearly facing some health and wellbeing issues, and expecting that our community advisor, Mr. Coffey, would retain contact and a sense of where the organisation was at. And in terms of further support, I think that is via the type of funding that we are looking at. The group itself has sought the support of Matawai to help with its strategic plan, and we think that is absolutely appropriate that it do that. And so the community advisor allocated to support that group, Mr. Coffey, will continue to have at least a minimum of monthly and contact with them.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, because I think certainly that kind of event just actually goes to the very heart of something, and it's really traumatic, and it's really important that that group is really supported. Thank you. Thank you for that response.
Councillor Barker. I can't hear you.
Well, I've just pushed unmute. So I just want to ask a question about building the hub. I see that there's a plan to build a hub 2022-23 in their strategic plan, and I wonder whether they were being given any help. Obviously, it's a challenging situation to go to the council. So I guess it's the long-term plan. Has that come through our long-term planning process?
No, it hasn't, and I think please note that this strategic planning that they've started with Matawai is very recent, and they still need to actually employ someone, which is what the funding request is about. And so any further action from them I wouldn't expect to occur until they've got somebody in place.
That's your question. Thank you very much. And Mr. Coffey, just particularly want to acknowledge your work with that group. Excellent. Okay. Nothing further from staff on that application. Okay. I guess the thing that I would say is it's always a great pity when we don't have more money, but that's on us to give groups. But it's good to see that we're able to give a reasonable amount. On to the Caversham Community Group, and I note that Councillor Lefisa and Ms. Parker will stay with their videos off for this one. They both have conflicts. Do we have any questions on this? Ms. Malloy.
I wanted to acknowledge that it's great to hear that they're doing well, because I think this is the group that had been struggling a little in the past. So it's really good to see that there's development in the way they articulate what they're doing in their application as well. I did have a question that is the committee representative of the community, and also I noted in the budget that there's unspent money of about a little over 4.5K, and just if there was any reason, or it doesn't matter, or
Yep, so I can speak to that. Kia ora, everyone. So with regard to the committee and representation from the community, so it's just come into my portfolio, so Dr. Mai might want to speak to this as well, but it is a fairly good representation, I would say. They have business, they have someone from the local school, and then they have some different age groups, different genders. So yeah, certainly one of my times where I have gone out to support was when they were at Caversham Reserve, and there was significant range of, where they were like, this is a committee member of this, and, this person. So it's quite pleasing to see. With regard to their surplus, some of this surplus, so I did speak to them about this, it has come from probably not reimbursing one particular volunteer. And so that was what I've been working with them on, is properly reimbursing volunteers for expenses that they may have had. And this is one of the key volunteers. There's sort of a hesitancy to then be reimbursing himself. And so that's been some of the conversation around development that I've been having with them with regard to looking at a framework in which to operate as volunteers, so that he's not sort of making a personal decision to reimburse himself, but actually just operating within a framework that is there. So actually it's connected to that sort of framing up with that philosophy of being able to run as a volunteer group, but being able to do it in a really professional and safe way. We did also speak that actually groups, for sustainability and for safety of an organisation, having a surplus is actually a plus, and being able to have some there in reserve should the world, and certainly at this time, it's evidence of certainly of organisations having some safety net there, so by way of surplus.
Can I answer your question? I'd like to just acknowledge that. I think that is a challenge for many volunteer groups, and also that issue of them carrying expenses for a long period can burn people out as well, and it's an unreasonable expectation. So that's extremely helpful. Thank you for your work. Ms Harrison, are there any other questions for Ms Harrison? Okay. I was very pleased to see that they'd made some progress, particularly around the survey which was done, implemented very successfully. That was great to hear, because I know that was a bit of a roadblock for a little while. Full credit to staff. Moving on to the Corsafine Community Hub, and we have no conflicts of interest on this one. So Councillor Lefiso and Ms Parker, would you like to return and join us? Welcome back. And Mr Coffey's going to answer any questions. Thank you. Any introductory remarks, Mr Coffey?
No.
No? Okay, thank you. Taking this read. What questions do we have? Any questions or comments? Ms Malloy.
I just wanted to acknowledge the mention in the report that not funding this means that this group will have to spend / perhaps waste time on other funding applications. I think that's a really important acknowledgement, that an enormous amount of time goes into writing funding applications by people who often don't have the capacity or don't have the skills. And I think where we can support that work not having to be done, I'm all about it.
Yeah, interesting point you make, and we can't write the applications for them, but I know staff walk alongside, and I was reminded of this recently when interacting with a community group, of just the total lack of understanding of people that are very strong in other fields of their life, but have absolutely no idea about how to apply. It's a very specialised skill, but also have no understanding of conflicts of interest or those kinds of matters. So I don't think we can make any assumptions, and I'm sure staff don't. I know that they walk alongside groups in that journey. So yeah, good point. Councillor Barker.
I noticed that this group was doing weekly food parcels and had a community garden, and I just wondered, because quite a few of the other groups were doing food bank facilitation, etc. So I just wonder, in an overview, how that works. Are they doing their own food banks basically, or are they using some of the other services throughout Dunedin?
So Kiwi Harvest do a weekly delivery there. I think it's on a Friday, and they do then parcel up food parcels that are collected to, I think, between 40 to 60 people at a time at the moment during COVID. They also have a food pantry just sitting in their car park, and that has any surplus food or food that's been donated sitting in that. And whenever you're up there for meetings, in the half hour you're there, in late afternoon, there could be 3 to 4 different people will just come and have a quick nosy to see what is available. So that food security is quite an important thing in that community, yes, as it is in a lot of our communities, unfortunately.
Thank you for raising that, Councillor Barker. And I think we've all been made very aware of how critical that is in terms of lockdown and what we've watched happening, not only in our own community, but particularly in the Auckland community through COVID. And these systems that we have and processes are so important, and God forbid if we ever find ourselves in the same situation as Auckland has, those processes are going to be, and frameworks are going to be really important. I mean, I would like to think we didn't need them, but that would be naive. So full credit, and I think any acknowledgement we can give as you're going through with these groups about how much we value what they do and want to support them in any way we can would be really valuable. Ms Malloy.
Just following on from your comments there, Councillor Geary, is there a role for the DCC organisation to play in supporting that food resilience holistically across the city somehow, in terms of that, you know, disaster mitigation, future proofing?
I will hand over to
already
Joy.
do. So we were both involved, both from a community development perspective and an economic development perspective, in looking at longer term planning around food resilience. We connect with all of the food banks, and also with Kiwi Harvest, looking at how those things, happen in the city. We know there are some gaps. We've identified those to central government, so we're already in that space, actually. It is complex, it is not easy, but it is a priority from our community development perspective.
And the thing I'd like to add to that too is that in the middle of a crisis, so that work's ongoing, but in the middle of a crisis, we have a welfare team, and Mr. Pickford has been the head of that, and that welfare team activates during lockdown for any of those kinds of matters. And I know they were very busy in the first lockdown. I'm not certain how busy in the second lockdown. Do you have any?
Yes, so all of the people from the community development team that are in this room are part of the welfare response during a civil defence emergency. And so we weren't as, there wasn't a need in the city. It was decided by civil defence to activate for this lockdown, but we certainly held a number of Zoom meetings and provided information and connected with various community groups to ensure that if there were gaps, we were aware of them. We were supporting groups to connect with each other around resolving those gaps. So it wasn't about the council necessarily being the organisation that would resolve an issue. In fact, a lot of it, bringing people together, they were able to share information and connect themselves and actually work together to deal with some of the problems that they were facing at the time. And that we see as a key part of what we do as a community development team.
Yeah, and I think that work is just so pivotal, and I have been involved in the periphery, and the welfare team deals with a very diverse group of challenges at these times. And I was struck by a particular situation I came across through a public post where a young mother in our community breastfeeding her child, unsure about, whether this in the last lockdown, unsure about the safety of doing that and getting the vaccination, and sick children getting COVID tested, and very, very challenging, getting out to get food and all of those things. So it's been happening now, but we have good processes in place, and I can't speak highly enough of our staff and the work they do for that, but it's not always kind of seen. So thank you for asking the question, Ms. Malloy. Any other questions on Costa-Feen Community Hub? No, then we'll move on to Greater Tauri Community Network, which staff members did.
Mr. Coffey.
Mr. Coffey. Any opening remarks?
This is an organisation, the governance is new, but the organisation has been running for some time, and the staff that have been working with it will be not necessarily, but more than likely will be the similar staff who are already working for it. So it's been a development from being umbrellaed by both Saddle Hill Community Foundation and Target Neighbourhood Support, to setting up its own governance structure sitting out in Moscow now. So I'd like to see this development.
Well, thank you, Mr. Coffey. And I know that Ms. Parker has got a conflict, so she's turned off her video. Questions for Mr. Coffey? Questions? Councillor Elder.
Just a question about the new governance and how it looks. Are you happy with the way it's moving in that sense?
Yes, very happy. They have been working with both us, Department of Internal Affairs, and the Otago Community Law to make sure that their governance documentation is accurate, but also the framework is good for them as well. And my understanding is that at the last, or both the current community board meetings, they will be presenting to the community boards as well, saying this is who we are, this is what we intend to do, we really want to make a difference and work alongside the two community boards in the area. Very happy with that. It'll be the set up a bank account, always difficult process these days because of the banks' demand for people turning up all at the same time, all with lots of documentation, but they'll make that happen as well.
Any further questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to Power, Progress of Wakawaiti area, and
So not Mr. Cookie this time, but Ms. Harrison.
Ms. Harrison. So this has no, welcome back, Ms. Parker. This has no conflicts of interest. So Ms. Harrison, any opening remarks?
No.
Okay, any questions? I had a question, which was around the winding up of the youth club. Could you speak to that?
I can speak to it. So that was part of their funding last time, was to do a youth club, which moved into being an after-school youth club. I've spoken to them around during the time where they started to reflect on I guess the way that it was being carried out, the attendance, and the impact that it was having on the community. I spoke to them around what had, because I didn't hold history further than the year, what had sort of brought them to that place. And they said that they had some comments from people around the need. So we spoke about, I guess, sort of in future decisions, sort of doing a wider understanding around needs. So that was sort of some learning. And then I guess as staff gave them permission to finish up something, because that's often a sense of failure was certainly there. And that we really reflected on that and said, well, actually, for the season that it ran, it met a need, and that it's okay to finish something, to reevaluate, to survey. That's exactly right, to survey the community and to then approach holiday programs or youth work responding to need from parents around holiday programs afresh. And so that's what's happening. And so there's collaborative work with the surf lifesaving, and so there's some really good robust conversations happening within the community for future work.
Excellent, thank you. Any questions from anyone? Ms. Parker.
Oh, kia ora koutou. It's actually not so much a question. Well, I suppose there's a question packed in here. I just wanted to, I just really wanted to acknowledge the quality of the assessments for these place-based grants, just across the board with all of the community development teams. So thank you for taking that time to really dig deep into the stories of these groups. It's been really appreciated as I read through those assessments. And I also just really wanted to acknowledge the community-led development lens that you've brought to those assessments, because this whole point of this funding is about community building and not social service delivery. So just really appreciate that that real understanding of what community-led development in a place-based context looks like, and that really sat there in these assessments. And so I just, on extension of that, I just wonder if the community development team, if you have any thoughts on how you might continue to grow that best practice amongst our, or support the growth of that best practice amongst our place-based communities and across the board, because I know that there are many different there's complexities for communities in terms of trying to develop, their best practice models while also being responsive to the needs that they have on the ground.
So I'd like to just kick that off, because I overlooked, you've reminded me, thank you, Ms. Parker, to acknowledge a political decision which does give a little bit more breadth, and it's not entirely to answer your question, but it's a start. And I just want to acknowledge Councillor Walker in moving and speaking to the increase in the pool for place-based through the long-term plan. It was the only fund that we got across the line, and that was a great initiative. So that allows more resourcing to happen. But I'll hand over to Ms. Lanini for any response to that more specifically.
I think we're really, as a team, quite committed to see how the council can support ongoing capability building and that best practice, while still ensuring that we're that arm's length away from community-led development, because then that's a fine line for us as a community development team, which I think we're really aware of. We have within our annual budget put some budget in to support capability and capacity building, and we will hold some conversations. We're in level 1 hopefully soon with a number of stakeholders about how, including the place-based groups, about how we could support that over the coming year, or really 2 years. So that's where we're at the present time.
And the thing I'd add to is that at a political level, not all of my colleagues are closely in touch with the work. I mean, we bring it to their attention at the appropriate times. I'd be appreciative of a comment from you, Councillor Lepiso, in a moment, but that, you know, not everyone, if you're not dealing with it particularly, you're not always aware of the work done by community groups. But I believe this committee certainly understands the depth and breadth of community building that goes on, and our staff. Councillor Lepiso, would you have anything to add to that? In terms of your deputy?
Kia ora for the opportunity. Yes, thank you for raising the issue, Ms. Parker. And I'm aware that in the community development sphere, we've had the Funding for Equity symposiums, or hui. So yes, I think that with the strategic refresh of the work being done by Mana Hautu, the General Manager of Māori Relationships and Policy, that's going to be an exciting space where overall the whole organisation will see a refresh of our strategic framework. And I think that's going to be an exciting development in terms of a long-term strategic approach to funding, not only for communities and place-based organisations, but the city as a whole. So that is a work that's been done now by Ms. Wikaida and her team, and they'll be informing the council laws as well as doing mahi with the staff. So that's exciting, I think.
Thank you, Deputy. That's extremely helpful, those comments. So where did we get to with this one? Do we have any other questions around the power application? No? Okay, we'll move on then. And we're now on the South Dunedin Community Network, and Ms. Parker will take her leave on the video. She has a conflict of interest.
Dr. Tamimi will answer.
And Dr. Tamimi. So Dr. Tamimi, do you have any opening comments? No. So any questions from colleagues? Yes, Councillor Barker.
I see that they were fortunate enough to get the $400,000 or approximately funding from the government. Could you just explain? I read the little bit that there was about what the funding was to be used for, but I just didn't quite understand how that was going to work. And I know COVID will have affected their planning for that, but could you give us a little overview of it, please?
Yeah, definitely. Assalamu alaikum, kia ora koutou katoa. So as you have just mentioned, Councillor Parker, they received, the South Dunedin community received the support from DIA for 5 years. There was a document that was attached to the application as well, outlining that this funding is separate from the funding that South Dunedin Community Network would receive from different sources. This would require a governance body, which is separate from the South Dunedin Community Network body. This governance body hasn't been established yet. There is a work which is in collaboration with the South Dunedin Community and South Dunedin Community Network and the advisors from DIA in order for them to establish that board. Once the governance board is established, they will be looking into a community plan. So the representatives on that governance board will be looking into the needs within that community, the wider community of South Dunedin, and put a plan in place. It is worth mentioning that the financial allocation for that is not to exceed $400,000 per year. However, it is also important to mention that the agreement hasn't been signed yet, because there is some work in the background that needs to be taking place, which is taking place currently, and primarily reaching a partnership agreement with Mana Whenua. However, the work is ongoing, and the South Dunedin Community Network, being there with the community for good time and making sure that the voices of the community are well represented. They are very excited about this. However, it has been made clear that it's going to be a separate and a different governance body.
Councillor Elder.
Indeed, it's a really exciting opportunity for South Dunedin, which is great. One of my observations just at the latest hui is also it's creating a lot of work to do this, like because to spend 400,000 and consult with the community, etc., is a huge amount of work, and they're doing a lot of work presently on that. Does the fund itself actually support partially the work that needs to be done to do this right, or someone to drive this work? Because my concern is it's a fantastic opportunity, but also their resources being poured into it without the recompense or the opportunity to say put more money into the work that they can't do because they're putting it into this. If you could, it's a bit of a confusing way of saying it, but can you get the idea?
Yeah, sure. In my latest conversation with the network, there will be staff appointed to carry out the activities and the work that needs to be done under this type of funding. And my understanding is that colleagues from DIA, they are working closely with the community there to make sure that they attend to those needs. And there is a plan in place. Definitely DIA, they have got their own plan. We keep communicating with DIA through our monthly catch-up and during other means and avenues for communication. However, the latest discussion, as I mentioned, that there will be staff appointed to be carrying out the work that is supposed to be done in that space.
Thank you for that, because I can see the amount of work creating a big burden if it's not actually supported properly. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Elder. Dr. Tamimi, just a high-level question, and it's certainly not to do this group out of any money or anything like that, but when a group is getting a large amount of government funding, how does that impact on our grants to them? Forgive me if I was distracted and didn't. If you already covered that.
To answer that,
Please, yes.
I think from a more strategic point of view, we look at all of the funding that groups have, but also look at what is the work that they're expected to do for the funding. Yes. So a number of groups that apply to the council for funding, particularly in the community area, already receive funding from government for specific contracts. However, and it's unfortunate that many of those government contracts have not increased in money for somewhat like at least 10 years in any significant manner. And so that does leave organisations with a deficit quite often, or unable to do all of the work that they need to do. So we look at all of those things. What is the work they're expected to do, the other funding that they receive, what are the other things the group does for the community, and then what are they asking for from us as a council? Because we're not a full funder of anybody. And when we make those assessments and then recommendations to the subcommittee.
So it doesn't give us an opportunity to divert some of the money we might have given this group to another group because they're getting a large amount from the government.
Well, I think the complexity of this is they've the group itself has got funding, but the funding is for a whole of community approach that they currently don't have any resource to deliver. But still, as the network, they have their own set of activities that they still need to deliver to the community. And that is what we are recommending is provided in terms of support.
I thought that was important to ask, though, just for the optics, as they say. Any other questions? Councillor Barker.
I have a question. I noticed that they, South Dunedin Community Network are rent free, and I think I saw rates relief in another application. And obviously council supports a lot of these community groups in a lot of different ways. And I just wondered about whether we go forward and offer rent free or rates relief, or whether they apply to council to get those, get that support.
Would you like to answer, Rachel?
So rates relief goes to organisations who either own or rent their properties. And we encourage any organisation that is doing that to come to us for rates relief. Currently, I think we're providing I think it's about 170 organisations receive rates relief, which is $580,000. So it's a significant pool of money. And they're rent free because they're actually physically in a DCC owned building. And unless they go back into another DCC owned building, we can't provide them with rent free. There's no mechanism for us to provide them with rent free. So they are looking for that opportunity. And I know that I'm standing through that they're close to finding something, but I don't know if anything's finalised.
Just probably to add that that particular arrangement was opportunistic at the time, but due to changes in the actual building, there will be a change in how things work in the future. And obviously there may be groups who hear this and think there must be 3 DCC building space. I'm advised by our property team we have limited space in our current buildings. So just to note that for the subcommittee.
Thank you very much. Anything else on that particular application? Okay, well, I'm going to call an adjournment. Just it's a natural pause before we get on to the multi-year funding. Just a 10-minute break to get a coffee, have a comfort stop. So Paul, could you please pause the meeting? We're going to adjourn it. I'm going to move. We adjourn it. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor LaFisto, all those in favour, raise your hand. That is carried. So Paul, if you can pause the meeting. Thank you. Welcome back to this meeting for place-based grants. And we're moving now on to the multi-year funding. We have two applications, the Greater Green Island Community Network Charitable Trust and the North East Valley Community Development Project. So we're going to start with the Greater Green Island group, and we have no conflicts of interest for this. The staff member who's going to deal with this is Ms. Harrison. Any opening remarks?
No.
Can I just have, and it may be you or maybe Ms. Nalini, just a reminder about the multi-year funding and how that works and the checks and balances in regards to that.
Sure. So this is one of our few funds that currently allows for multi-year funding. Traditionally, the way in which multi-year funding has worked is that groups apply, and if multi-year funding is approved by this subcommittee, then in essence, they receive the same amount of money for the 2 or 3 years that they've applied for. However, that following year's funding is not confirmed until we have received a report back from the applicant the following year that is approved by the subcommittee. So in theory, the money is there and it's allocated in the budget, but no approval, final approval is done until the subcommittee is satisfied with the report it receives.
So would it be true to say, Joy, my impression is that there has been in the community building area a desire for multi-year funding. Groups often comment, in my experience, on the help that it provides them in terms of reliability of funding, knowing what they can do in their planning and so forth. Would that be your impression, that there's greater sort of comment on that and a desire for that? Would that be a...
Yes, both from this fund and I mean across all our funds, groups are advising us that it would be much more helpful for them and much more sustainable if multi-year funding was available to them. So certainly, I think in the past when it has been provided, the groups that it has been provided to have found it a significant benefit for them in terms of not having to come back to us annually with another application, but also being able to identify that other funders they have in multi-year.
Excellent, thank you. That's really good. Right, we have a question from Ms. Malloy.
I just wanted to note that that's true of all the funds, that it would be amazing if there was some, and I know that's a big picture, long-term rethink, but it would make most organisations in the city, arts organisations, definitely, I can speak to that confidently, that arts organisations would definitely benefit from multi-year funding. Not a question.
Thank you. Ms. Harrison, just going back to you, any comments for this one? No. Okay, so the specific application, the Greater Green Island Community Network, any questions, comments from subcommittee colleagues on this one? Councillor Elder.
I note a staff member left last year because she set up a gym or something to that effect. I was just wondering how the process has gone in finding someone else and getting that long-term staffing as well as long-term funding.
Yeah, so I can speak to that. Actually, they had 2 of their community workers change out, yes, last year, at the beginning of this year. So what they chose to do was to employ 1 community worker to close out the year, and he brought, as I said in the assessment, a significant amount of experience and strong networks into the role, which has been great. They are considering a time where they reevaluate, I guess, what those 2 specific community roles could entail, so that they're responding to the latest survey as best they can, so that they're not just sort of saying take on the exact roles that those other 2 community workers did, but able to work out what is the best approach and then employ well from there. But the community worker that is there currently is doing an excellent job, especially around development and with the community garden and the community shed. And we've seen already development in those two areas so far as their own independence and so on going forward. So yeah, he's doing very, very well, and it's been a really strong transition for sure.
Oh, it's great to hear. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor. One of the things I noted during the long-term plan, councillors were invited out to that area, and it occurred to me that it was actually very helpful, just a wee note to park. That was very helpful in terms of councillors' understanding of the place-based work, and I can see Councillor Elder with their thumbs up. That gave a much more in-depth understanding of that grassroots work at a local level, so something to think about for the future. Any further questions on this application? No? All right, we'll move on now to the North East Valley Community Development Project, and Ms. Parker will pop off her screen. She has a conflict of interest. And Mr. Coffey.
So thank you. I have no comments, but really happy to answer any questions.
Right, thank you. Questions, please. I have a question. Did they lose a staff member, key staff member recently?
Yes.
Change in that area?
They have had a change of staff member. And like a lot of organisations, there are staff who come and go. That staff member has been around actually for on and off for a long time, very experienced. They've retained someone who, I'm not sure, Charlotte might have been there nearly the whole time.
Yes.
So they have this breadth of continuity with that position, and I know that they are definitely going to re-advertise. This is the most established place-based organisation. They have been around for a long time and received significant funding initially from Department of Internal Affairs for a long period of time. Hence, their budget's a bit bigger than anyone else, and they also have quite a number of strands to what they do, and you'll see they've picked up a number of contracts from MSD and other places where they've employed part-time people. So there's a lot of workers coming and going out of that, out of their hub at the moment.
Would it be true to say that you've really touched on some of you through our discussions, that as an organisation like this matures, at different points of its maturity, it will require different kinds of staff, different people, different skill sets? Would that be a fair summation?
Yes, it's definitely a fair summation. And you'll also, with their last annual general meeting, a lot of reasonably long-standing chairpersons have stood down. They have a new chairperson who's been on their board for a while. So it's also shows the maturity of this organisation and that their governance has a continuity plan going forward as well. Succession.
That's great to hear. It's a real role model, isn't it, for other groups? Any further questions or comments? Okay, all right, thank you. So we've been through all of our applications, and I'm assuming because no one has raised anything to the contrary, but now would be the time, if you don't have a conflict of interest, that the amounts that staff have recommended are the amounts that we will look at for moving. We will turn our attention now to those motions, and I just want to signal that I'm going to do them in a particular order because that manages the conflicts of interest. So we're going to start with 1 and 2, and if Councillor Fiso and Ms Parker can switch off when we get to the point, switch off their videos at that point, not quite yet, Councillor Fiso. And then I'll take 4, 6 and 2 with Ms Parker stepping back, and those are the rest of your conflicts, Anna, and then we'll take 3, 5 and 1, and the 2 of the previous one being the multi-year funding, which have no conflicts of interest. Is that acceptable to everybody? Yes, excellent. All right, so I'm going to move that we grant the Brockville Improvement and Amenities Society. Some of these names are quite long, aren't they? The recommended funding as per the spreadsheet, 44,000. And end of year, the two folk have gone. So Councillor Fiso and Ms Parker have stood back from this. And secondly, the Caversham Community Group, $13,657. I'm going to move that we grant those amounts. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Elder. Would anyone like to speak to that? No, so I'm going to put it to the vote. All those in favour, can you raise your hand? That's everyone, so there are no abstentions and no one against, so that motion is carried. Welcome back, Councillor Lefiso. Hello again. So now we're going to consider items 4, 6 and the multi-year funding, item 2. So this is the Greater Taieri Community Network, the South Dunedin Community Network, and the North East Valley Community Development Project. And I'm going to move that we grant the sums of, as per the spreadsheet, for the Greater Taieri Community Network of $62,861. For the South Dunedin Community Network, $55,000. And in the multi-year funding, the North East Valley Project, $62,500. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Barker. Would anyone like to speak to this? I'll put it to the vote. If you can raise your hand for aye. No one's against, so that motion is carried. Moving on now, welcome back, Ms Parker. We're now going to consider 3, 5 and 1. So starting with the Corstorphine Community Hub, I move that we grant them $60,000. The Progress of Wakawiti area, known as PAWA, $39,482. And finally, the multi-year funding, first item, the Greater Green Island Community Network Charitable Trust, $62,500. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Lefiso, thank you. Would anyone like to speak to that? I'll put it to the vote then. All those in favour, raise your hand. That is unanimous, and that is carried. Excellent. Now, I believe we've also got a recommendation around noting the report, so I'm going to go back to my agenda. We've decided on the allocation of grants as per our decisions we've just made, and I'm going to move that we note the report. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Elder. All those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. Now, are those all the decisions? Ms Murray, very good. I'm just going to check in with Ms Lanini. Are there any parting comments, Ms Lanini?
No, just to thank the subcommittee as always for your time and your review of the work and the assessments. Thank you.
And I'd like to add to that, thank you all for your participation today. I know you all have other commitments, jobs and places to be, and really thank you for your time today. I want to thank the staff, Rebecca, for organising the technical behind the scenes, getting us all sorted in these strange times, and to the staff for their continued work in the community. We were just talking in the break about the level of satisfaction, job satisfaction for our team and working in this area in particular, and seeing at a grassroots or grassroots level the effects of this funding and the work it does. It's never enough. But I really appreciate, as chair of the subcommittee, the work that goes on behind the scenes, staff working with the community, and all of you in your various roles working in the community. It does make a huge difference. And on that day that we just went into lockdown, we managed to squeeze in the hui And then we found out after the hurry that we were going into lockdown. So thank you for all the work done there. And as I said at the start, Councillor Liffey, so please pass on those condolences to your community. Thank you for your attendance today. I'm going to ask if Councillor Liffey so would finish with a karakia. I've just got
just wanting to acknowledge to the subcommittee that this will be Ruth Harrison's last meeting with us. Ruth is heading back to Australia with her whānau for whānau reasons. We will miss her immensely, but this will be her last subcommittee meeting.
Oh, so before we finish, I did not know that until this minute. So, Ms. Harrison, it's been a joy. You light up the room the moment you come in. You work so conscientiously behind the scenes. It's been an absolute delight to work with you. We'll miss you hugely, hugely. We wish you and your whānau all the very best as you journey back to Australia. But please come back someday. So thank you.
It's already feeling very emotional.
I know.
With my place-based group.
Yes, and I'm sure that other members of the committee would concur with that sentiment. That is such a loss to our team. Go well, everybody. I'm going to ask if Councillor Fiso would finish the meeting for us.
Unuhia ki te uru tapanui, kia wātea, kia māma, te kakao. Te tinana te wairua I te ara takakatu. Koea rā e roko, whakairia ake ki ruka, kia tīna, huie, tāiki e.
And before you all leave, if you could finish the live stream, please. Just need to speak with the group around some practical matters. I declare the meeting closed first of all, and if you could just finish the live